Good evening. My name is Stephanie Sharp, Vice Chair of the Johnson County Community College Board of Trustees. I'll be chairing this evening's committee meeting in place of Chair Musil, who's unable to join us this evening. I'd like to officially call to order the January 19th board meeting, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We go to roll call and recognition of visitors. Ms. Schlicht.
We have two visitors this evening, Dick Carter and Roberta Eveslage.
Thank you. We move to the open forum section of the board meeting, which is a time for members of the community to provide open comments to the board. There will be one open forum period during each regularly scheduled board meeting. Comments are limited to 5 minutes unless a significant number of people plan to speak. In that instance, the chair may limit a person's comments to less than 5 minutes. In order to be recognized, individuals must register at the door at each board meeting prior to the open forum agenda item. When addressing the board, registered speakers should be respectful and civil and should not address matters related to individual personnel matters with the college. As a practice, the college does not respond in this setting when the matter concerns personnel issues or matters that are being addressed through our established grievance or suggestion processes, or are otherwise the subject of review by the college or the board. We do have one open forum speaker registered this evening, Lori Paldino with the JCCC Faculty Senate.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Trustees, President Sopcich, and administrators. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Faculty Senate. I am Vice President of the Senate and an adjunct in both the English Journalism and Business divisions. I am standing in for Patrick Lafferty, President of the Senate and Associate Professor of Web Development and Digital Media, who teaches at this time. The mission of the Senate begins with the premise that faculty has primary responsibility for maintaining standards of excellence in higher education, both at JCCC and in the larger academic community. We represent all faculty, full-time and adjuncts, union members and non-union members. In fact, our executive committee includes the leadership of the Faculty Association and Ed Affairs in an effort to be inclusive and fully represented. The Senate maintains that high-quality education and student success depends on faculty engagement beyond basic teaching duties, and those goals depend on faculty members being involved in decisions that impact instruction. Consequently, it acts as a resource through which that knowledge and expertise can be used by students, staff, administrators, and trustees in making well-informed decisions. We thought we'd take a moment in this open forum to update you on what's been happening in the Senate this academic year. First and foremost, we've spent a portion of every meeting discussing the expiration of the exemption of the state of Kansas's conceal and carry law, currently enjoyed by colleges and universities. Today, the Senate and the Faculty Association have crafted a statement which I will leave to Dennis to read during his time, since I only have 5 minutes. We also have representatives active on the COPS committee who have kept faculty posted of their progress, and we continue to meet with administration to achieve a conceal and carry policy that protects the physical safety and culture of academic exploration necessary on a 21st century college campus. We would hope to hear from the board on their stance on the issue and the legislature's moves to retain that exemption. This fall, there was also heightened attention given to the topic of faculty engagement. In fact, the Senate presented its own statement to the Engagement Committee in the hopes of contributing to that conversation. Because the conversation centered on full-time engagement, the question remained for the Senate as to what adjunct engagement means and how we can support adjuncts. An engaged faculty is a strong faculty, no matter the number of hours those instructors are on campus, and we'll take up that issue this spring. We have also made it our goal to strengthen communication between the Chief Academic Officer and the Senate, as the Senate is the natural forum for conversation about new policies and pending issues. Two recent topics that come to mind, the reorganization of the divisions, which impacts Senate representation, by the way, and what has become known as the 30% rule, were two things, in fact, that we discussed this last hour with Dr. McLeod. And thank you, Dr. McLeod. We appreciate your time. We remain hopeful that the CAO will use the Senate as a sounding board for new ideas and ways to continue to keep the college fresh and relevant. We'd also like to extend the offer to you, Board of Trustees members, to attend any and all of our meetings. We meet on the third Thursday of each month, conveniently just before this one, from 3 to about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. Our schedule is posted on our blog site and is available on the Senate page of the college website. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Moving to awards and recognitions.
Trustee Sharp, we have no awards or recognitions this evening.
Okay. The goal is to set a land speed record.
You
by
just
the
might.
way. Working on it. Student Senate report, Mr. Witten.
I'm Donnie Witten, the Student Senate President. I'd like to thank the board for allowing me to address them on behalf of the Student Senate. Last semester, we had a really fun-filled, exciting semester, and we got a lot done. We had our trick-or-treat with kids at the end of October. We had a lot of games where the kids could come and participate, and I think we had a big spider web on the wall. It was a version of Pin the Tail on the Donkey, but we put spiders up on the spider web. But we had a massive turnout, much bigger than last year, and so it was a really big success. Our photos with Santa in December was also another really big success. We're not only got a lot of great photos with the kids, but a lot of the departments around Johnson County Community College came and participated in the clubs and organizations. So it was a great way to be able to celebrate the holidays and bring JCCC closer together. The big success of our semester, though, was our JCCC Gives. If you're not familiar with that, it's a program where you're able to nominate members of the JCCC community that are down on their times for the holidays, and then the Senate raises money to help provide for these families or individuals that aren't able to provide for themselves during that time of year. We had a goal of raising $2,000, and thanks to the hard work of all of our senators, but especially some innovative fundraising by our Vice President, Amanda Wang, and our Treasurer, Frankie Pang, we not only broke our previous fundraising record, but we blew it out of the water. We raised around $3,120. That really made a big difference for the 11 families that were nominated. A lot of those kids probably got some presents and some food on the table that day that they weren't going to get before. So for everybody that contributed, because there are people in this room that did, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the Student Senate, and those families were able to help. This semester, Student Senate will be focusing on strengthening the leadership skills of the Senate so that the hard work of this year can continue to the next year. We really want to continue to empower and encourage the senators we have so that they can step up and do bigger leadership roles next year, and hopefully not lose any of the momentum or the progress that we've made this year. And so up to this point, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who has made this semester so effective so far, because we've really been able to do a lot and had a lot of fun. So thank you guys, and that's all I have.
Can I just ask you a quick question? I keep calling you Mr. Witten. Remind me your military rank.
I was a staff sergeant.
Okay. Don't want to be disrespectful. Nancy?
Okay. I wanted to ask a little bit about the band. You've mentioned the band, and you and I talked about the band. The band this weekend, is that right? Home game?
I think, I can't remember the day now. It's the Wednesday in February that the first basketball game is.
Okay.
That's what we're shooting for.
Okay.
They just started practicing again with Ryan Highland this week, so he's going to assess over this week whether or not they're still ready for that, and then I will get the word out.
It's all good. I just thought it sounded very exciting, and thank you for your work on just the enthusiasm and spirit.
Well, thank you.
It's good.
Trustee Cook?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Witten, I just want to compliment you and the Senate and the faculty. You said a key line in there, bringing the campus together. And I think we all realize that there are a number of students that perhaps are challenged, not perhaps, but are challenged from week to week and month to month. And so for you to provide leadership and collectively exceed your goal by over $1,000, that's very commendable, and I think we, as trustees, all appreciate, as Trustee Ingram said, your leadership and your enthusiasm. and raising the Cavalier spirit, so thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Trustee Lindstrom.
How do students inform you that they're in need during the holidays?
So, as the Senate, we go around and we distribute as many of these forms as we can, that just say, you can put down a person's name and, what they're in need of, or, and it's all very anonymous, and those are turned in directly to Mindy Kinnaman, and she keeps all that very discreet. And so we do our best to get as many of those around campus as possible so that we can get as many names as possible to make sure we're really able to spread around that money we raise to make the best scenarios for those people over the holidays. And then, and this is just the money that we were raised, so people can also adopt a family, and several of those families were also adopted. And what they do is, then we find people to adopt, and they go to Mindy and say, hey, I want to adopt, or I want to give money. And the people that are adopted, you don't know who you're adopting, you just know what they need. And so you're able to adopt a whole family or one person from the family and buy things for that person. They just tell you the age and gender and what they're in need of, or, so it's all very anonymous, but.
Thank you.
Donnie, you've been a real pro for us. I mean, you spoke at some Enchanted Evening, you were a big hit, made that event very successful. I know you've spoken at foundation functions as well. Recently, I was at a deal and you received a STEM scholarship. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about that. So there were 27 applicants for the STEM scholarship, and 6 were selected. And so we had to write 2 essays, and those were, I think, sent to 2 different boards. I think state level and federal level, or
It's a national NSF, National Science Foundation
yeah,
grant.
and
Big deal.
they ranked those 20. Well, I guess it would be 2 per 27 essays, and from highest to lowest, and average those essays across the boards, and then pick the top 6 candidates. And it's a 3-semester auto-renewed scholarship, as long as you maintain your academic side and put in your time in the resource centers. And it's really a big honor to get it, and it's great that JCCC is able to bring that here and promote that sort of STEM development from junior college onto the 4-year level. It's going to provide a lot of data as well, and what resources are working, and what's able to contribute to student success. So I'm really excited to be part of that.
Donnie was one of the few college students here that got this. That was a $600 and some thousand grant from the National Science Foundation. Melinda Bryan Smith was a big part of that in our grants writing office, and it's quite an achievement for the college and for the individual students.
Wow, that's very cool. Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
College lobbyist report. Mr. Carter.
Well, good evening. Last week, we had the return of the legislature to Topeka, and things got started off in the fairly normal process, but we have a lot of new faces. About a third of the legislature is new this year, and we've got some folks that are very intent on making their mark. And so that means we have folks that are introducing bills. We've had some hearings much earlier in the process than we typically do. Lots of the first weeks of the legislative session is generally spent doing annual reports from different agencies and informational briefings. And we've already begun with some legislative hearings on budgets, on how we fill vacant congressional seats, some interesting topics. And so that has really changed the pace of the way the legislature typically starts. I don't plan to talk a lot about the first part of my report, although I'll answer questions if there are any from folks around the table. But essentially, I've laid out some of the governor's budget recommendations. I will just say that they were met with lukewarm approval by the legislature. And I think that the discussion on the rescission bill, which is the current budget year, it was anticipated that things would move swiftly. I think that process has slowed down, and we may not be seeing any action well into February. And so that starts to get a little dicey when you start approaching the end of the fiscal year. I know when you say February, it doesn't sound like, it sounds like it's a long way off, but when you're cutting $300-some million out of budgets, that starts to get a little interesting. So we'll see what happens with that process. Those conversations are ongoing. A lot of them are between leadership and the governor's budget director, but there are legislative hearings that have been scheduled on the rescission bill, and we'll see what happens. We've got to find $350-some million just in the current year to make the budget whole. Again, legislators aren't excited about the governor's budget recommendations, but they haven't come up with additional ideas themselves just yet. Let me talk a little bit about what has gone on just this week. Blake Flanders, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents, presented to the Senate Education Committee sort of the state of the state of higher education in Kansas. And I included a PDF of his slide deck in the report that I submitted. It's separate from the report, but you should have received that attachment, and I encourage you to take a look at it. He did cover the Foresight 2020 three main points, and certainly we fit into that conversation. I will say, and I didn't include this in the report, but some of the questions were along the lines of numbers of students, and so I'm sure that we'll see some requests either from the Board of Regents or from Legislative Research. A lot of that information is already contained at institutional research at the board office. But there are a number of areas where the legislators are desiring to see where students are attending, what their current success rate is, and along those lines. Dr. Sopcich has been in Topeka quite a bit this week anyhow. We had the opportunity to sit down with the chair of Senate Education for a great conversation just about where we are in the process with the other community colleges, where we are in the process with the Kansas Board of Regents. And we'll be taking those opportunities to meet with other members of the Johnson County delegation over the coming weeks. Kate Allen was in Topeka today, along with Dr. Sopcich and Jean-Claude. If you're not familiar with Jean-Claude, we should have had him here tonight. He is our school mascot, and today was Higher Education Day at the Capitol. All 32 institutions that the Board of Regents oversees were on display in the state capitol, and it again gave us the opportunity to showcase our college along with the other institutions of higher education in the state. I did have to leave before ice cream was served from K-State, so I'm a little bitter about that. But that's always an annual highlight for folks in the Capitol. We continue to prepare for the annual fly-in reception in Washington, D.C. Once again, we'll be helping coordinate that event in D.C. It is on Valentine's Day, so I'm hoping that a number of our staffers and members of the delegation choose to spend that evening with us. We don't have much control over that part of the calendar. But we are looking forward to that event. And then Josh Urich, who's the education staffer in Senator Roberts' office, will be on campus next Tuesday for a brief update, and we'll visit the CoLab and a few other things around campus. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Let me talk about a couple of bills that are out there. There are no Senate bills right now that have any application or impact to the college or its operations, but there are a few House bills out there that I'm tracking, most of which have not even been scheduled for hearings yet, but again, that's what I do, is just watch them as they sit or pop up on the hearing calendar. There's an interesting bill, and I do think this comes out of the Board of Regents, but I haven't confirmed with Matt Casey yet, that specifically addresses retirees and CAPERS under the Board of Regents retirement plan, which would exempt them from some of the issues related to work after retirement. And so that bill has not had a hearing, but we'll be following it very closely. There are a couple of exemption or creating a permanent exemption bills out there for concealed carry on campus and in public buildings. One just came out in the bill packet today. I haven't even had a chance to take a look at it to see exactly what it does. But the one bill that's out there that was introduced earlier this week deals with creating a permanent exemption on campuses, public buildings or municipal buildings, as well as hospitals. And so we'll be following those issues very closely as well.
Excuse me, Dick, who's sponsoring that? Do you know? Is that?
Well, I think there's a number of legislators that have requested introduction. In the House, I think the bill came from Representative Clayton here in Johnson County. In the Senate, the bill was introduced by a senator from Wichita. But I think there's a collaborative effort afoot by a number of legislators to look at those issues. There's another bill out there that the League of Municipalities has introduced that would create immunity for an employer. When the changes occur on July 1, we can create policy, but we cannot prohibit employees from carrying concealed. This bill or this proposed law would create an immunity for employers whose employees might carry while on duty but are not required to carry concealed weapon based on their job description. And so we'll be following that bill as well. That's House Bill 2081. There are a couple of bills out there that deal with tax issues. Again, not necessarily applicable to the college, but they affect a larger spectrum of the fiscal arena that we talk about when we talk about budget issues. One of them is a repeal of the LLC, S-Corp, non-wage income exemption. It's a full repeal of the LLC bill that passed in 2012. There's a lot of issues with that. Legislators have had several briefings from some CPAs this past week on just exactly what that looks like. It's not as simple as just wiping it off the books, and so we'll see what happens there. I anticipate that there will be a number of different bills that address that particular issue as well. And closely related, but a distant cousin, if you will. There's a bill that was introduced just yesterday to repeal the tax lid that was passed on local governments. Now, keep in mind, that doesn't impact the college, but again, those are things that we kind of just keep our eyes on when they get opened up and when they're out there. So I guess I would stop there. That kind of captures some of the salient bills that have been introduced up through today, and see if there's any questions.
I would quickly add, I think today's bill was Susan Kincannon's bill to exempt the University of Kansas Hospital from the Personal Protection Act, from the concealed carry.
I glanced at it quickly. That is included in the language. But there's another striking clause that would strike the statute that deals with all municipal or public buildings, and so it's not included in the title. And if that's the case, it wouldn't matter the italicized verbiage up above in the bill. And so that's why I'm hesitant to really get too far out there, especially since it was just a casual glance at the bill.
Crafty. Questions? Trustee
Thank you,
Carter?
Madam Chair. Mr. Carter, in your report, you listed 7 House bills. As I look through them, 4 of them deal in some form or fashion with concealed carry. Do you anticipate them being heard in one committee? And if so, what committee is that, and will they be combined?
Yeah, those bills are always heard in the House or Senate Federal and State Affairs committees. They very well could be combined in the end. We have a penchant, at least as of recent, for combining bills in conference committee reports. I'm not sure at what level the bills may or may not pass. I think our early indication is that should they pass, the permanent exemption bills, that is, they would be vetoed by the governor. I'm not sure where the line is on that particular issue for an override vote. That's going to be different than some of the other budget issues, I think, that are out there.
Thank you.
Good.
Dick, on capers, it's difficult to keep track of the moving capers allotments and rescissions or whatever. What's the deal in the governor's budget with regards to capers?
So the governor's budget recommendations, at least as far as the rescission component of the bill, that's the current year cuts, is to not repay the payment that was due at the beginning of the fiscal year. Actually, it was due at the end of at the beginning of the fiscal year. We didn't make that payment. It's been further delayed. The director of CAPERS, who was formerly the director of legislative research, a man that is much smarter than me, has indicated, at least before the legislature gathered back in Topeka, that there's about $170 million price tag for CAPERS this year just to make it whole.
Does that include that 8% that was supposed to be
I
added on?
don't believe
those
that
payments?
includes the 8% repayment. And I have to go back and look at that. I want to step back just a moment before I say that, because like you said, there are a lot of moving parts, and it's easily confused when you start talking about that. But those are the issues that are out there with respect to CAPERS.
Trustee Cross.
Yes, Mr. Carter, thank you, Madam Chair. Are we going to have a dental school? Did I read that right?
There are a number of things that have been proposed. There has been a DO school proposed, a private institution, should someone choose to locate one here in Kansas or affiliate with one of the other institutions. There's a recommendation on a dental school. There's a recommendation on a $15,000 total baccalaureate degree. There's a number of interesting proposals that are contained in the governor's budget. We'll see what actually happens when things start
He proposed.
getting hashed out. He
I'm
did.
sorry. I had to go back and reread that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a follow-up. Were there any suggestions on how to pay for those ideas?
I think that's one of those things that the legislature gets to talk about. There are some with respect to, there are some incentives, I should say, with respect to some of those programs. In particular, there were some scholarship incentives related to the $15,000 baccalaureate degree for the first institution that comes up with that. I don't know where the money comes from, but that's what we'll be talking about over the next few weeks, coming months.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Thank you.
Moving to committee reports and recommendations, I have the report on collegial steering. We met last week and had a good conversation, a lively conversation, as you could probably expect from the topic. We talked about what does the future of higher education look like under the new presidential administration. It was a good conversation about expectations related to the Higher Learning Commission, how those could be changing, and what we can do to prepare for those changes. I don't know that we came up with any cut and dried recommendations. More of an ongoing conversation about how we need to be flexible and observe the situation and watch the lay of the land. And it was a good conversation. That really concludes my report. In Human Resources Committee, Trustee Ingram.
Yes, Human Resources did not meet this month. We will meet on February the 6th.
Great. Learning Quality Committee, Trustee Cross.
Madam Chair, as requested, I'll summarize my report, and it's easy because we didn't meet on January 2nd due to the holiday. There were a number of items, however, that were sent to the committee electronically for consideration. The items will be brought forward for approval today and are found at the board packet at pages 1 and 2, and part of it, I believe, in the consent agenda. The next regular scheduled Learning Quality Committee meeting will be held on Monday, February 6th, 2017, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Cross. Management Committee, Trustee Dr. Crook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Management Committee did meet, as we always do, monthly, on Wednesday, January 4th. And I feel badly for the rest of you, because those of us that sit on the Management Committee have the privilege of receiving a great deal of information in detail. And I want to make that clear to the community, to the public, because sometimes we go through these reports rather quickly. And a tremendous amount of work goes into play with each of our departments, each of our divisions, and the faculty, staff, engagement represents many hours of work in getting these reports, and we sometimes go over them rather quickly. We received several reports, as I indicated. The first report was from Tom Clayton, Director of Insurance and Risk Management on the college's insurance program, and Susan Ryder, Director of Accounting Services and Grants, gave a financial ratio analysis. And I would say that, and you have the detail of those, summary of that, but on our insurance policy digest, it's just under 40 pages, 38 pages of detail, actually building by building, program by program, contents, and it's very extensive. And I just want to say to the board that I think those of us on the management committee have a very high level of confidence in the work that goes into the insurance program, and to make sure that our buildings and our resources are protected at the appropriate levels. And so I want to compliment them. It was a very outstanding report. Susan Ryder's report on the financial ratios, and I would just quickly say that I think there were like 5 or so. We have a primary reserve ratio financially. We have a net operating revenue ratio, a return on net assets ratio, a viability ratio, and I think another is a composite financial indicator. And I may have missed one or two, but the point is, again, there's lots of detail here, and our college is benchmarked against other institutions of those ratios, and an auditing firm sets a benchmark as to what is a good range and where we fall. And in each one of those ratio analysis, Johnson County Community College exceeds those ratios. And so I'm very pleased, I think as Trustee Cross and Trustee Lindstrom are hearing those reports as to the financial status of our college. We're very strong, very healthy, and I just again want to thank the team and the efforts that go into this analysis day in and day out. Rachel Lears presented the semi-annual review of the management budget reallocations. Again, as you might be reminded, as we deal with our budget, a budget is a financial plan that's established many months in advance, and sometimes you make adjustments throughout the year within departments or between departments. It's a routine activity we do each year, and we had a very detailed report on those transfers. I would remind you that the 2017-18 budget will be reviewed by the board at the annual budget workshop scheduled for April 20, and it is to be approved at our May board meeting. The budget kickoff was held, I believe, January 10th, and that whole process is underway as we begin to develop our next spending plan. Mitch Borchers presented the sole source report as well as a summary of awarded bids between $25,000 and $100,000. That summary can be found on page 6 of your board packet. Jeff Allen provided a monthly update on capital infrastructure projects, and that report begins on page 13 of your packet. Tom Pagano, along with Sandra Warner, provided a quarterly update on projects on our information services. Again, a detailed report of where we've been, where we are, and where we plan to go, and a great deal of work has gone into that work on a daily basis. We had a report on information technology security, which was presented by Philip Mine, the college's information technology security officer. I'm just overwhelmed in these meetings because I'm not of the age range of a guy like Philip. And Philip, when we start talking about cybersecurity, and by the way, we do have a cyber liability insurance policy. Many of you have probably been seeing recent claims of certain people against big institutions about cyber theft and fraud theft, and we're always very concerned about that. But Philip is moving into a faculty position in the college's computer information services, and those students are going to be tremendously blessed because I, for one, was very impressed with what Philip is about and what he's doing. So having said all of that, I just want to assure the board of trustees that we have some outstanding people every day doing the detail work, and we sometimes gloss over these reports in a very hurried manner. We do have some recommendations tonight. I believe there are 3. The first recommendation was for a transfer of funds from the college to the foundation. The Sustainability Committee has requested that $6,000 of recycling proceeds be transferred to the Johnson County Community College Foundation to be used for scholarships. It is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees authorize the transfer of $6,000 from the Sustainability Initiative Fund to the JCCC Foundation to be used for student scholarships, and I'll make that motion.
Second.
we have discussion?
I would say, Madam Chair, before we vote, that I believe that the Sustainability Initiatives Fund has been very generous since 2012, and I think the running score on the amount of money that they've transferred now is just under $60,000, $59,000 to be exact. So we applaud them for the great work they do in our sustainability effort to transfer these funds.
That is truly amazing. $60,000 in recycling. And just 6,000 this, what's the calendar year on that? Is it 6,000 this
Well, I think it's up to date for this
fiscal?
current year, I
I
think.
think this is the
16,
first
17.
transfer this is the first transfer. We generally do 2
Yeah.
transfers a year, so not surprisingly, if it ends up being 10 to 12 this year.
Awesome. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Secondly, we received bids for the proposal of the Student Center rooftop solar photovoltaic design and installation. It is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve the proposal from MC Power Companies in the amount of $146,833 plus an additional $14,683 to allow for contingencies for a possible unforeseen cost for a total expenditure not to exceed $161,516 for the Student Center rooftop solar photovoltaic design and installation, and I'll make that motion.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Okay, seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Finally, we have a recommendation for pavement maintenance and concrete restoration. Again, these are all part of our annual plan. It is the recommendation of the Management Committee that the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the college administration to approve the low bid of $125,272.84 from McConnell and Associates Corporation, Inc., plus an additional $12,527 to allow for contingencies for possible unforeseen costs, for a total expenditure not to exceed $137,799.84 for pavement maintenance and concrete restoration, and I'll make that motion.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That concludes the management report.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. President's recommendations for action. Dr. Suffolk. Oh, I'm sorry. We do
That's okay.
treasurer's report first.
Treasurer's report
Skipped
first.
you. Trustee Cross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The board packet contains the treasurer's report for the month ended November 30th, 2016. There are some items of note that include, at page 1 of the treasurer's report is the general post-secondary technical education fund summary. As of November 30th, 42% of the college's fiscal year had expired. The college's unencumbered balance, cash balance, as of November 30th, 2016 in all funds was $66.4 million. During November, the college made scheduled principal and interest payments as reflected in the Revenue Bonds Debt Service Fund in the Treasurer's Report. With respect to the 2011 Series Revenue Bonds, $231,438. Series 2012 Revenue Bonds, $522,650. The Series 2015 Revenue Bonds, $692,500, for a total of $1.446 million. Also during November, the college made the final principal payment on the Kansas Board of Regents Post-Secondary Education Institution Infrastructure Finance Program PEI loan in the amount of $663,326.93. Expenditures in the primary operating funds are within the approved budgetary limits, and it is therefore, Madam Chair, the recommendation of the college administration that the Board of Trustees approve the treasurer's report for the month ended November 30th, 2016, apparently subject to audit.
Is that a motion?
I so move. Yes, ma'am. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now to Dr. Sopcich. and
Thank
the
you, Trustee
President's
Sharp.
report.
I know that many of you have expressed your disappointment to me with regard to the fact that we have not had a lightning round in some time, and I think there's no better way to begin the new year with a lightning round. So I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Korb. Judy.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I want to highlight two things that are very important to the future of Johnson County Community College. The first one being our HLC accreditation process that we are going through. So we're diligently working on the systems portfolio, which is our self-study, and it will actually be in draft form available for all of us to review and take a look at within a couple of weeks. So we'll do that and give feedback, and then we'll actually submit that on June the 1st. You know that our site visit is coming up spring of 18, and one of the worst things that could happen would be when they get here, we say, "What? We didn't know you were coming." So you'll hear me talk about this over and over and over until you get tired of it. But we're in the process of that, and it is really important. The other thing that I just want to mention, because it's hard to believe, but it's been 3 years since we completed our strategic plan. And so we are this semester going back through the process now of reviewing and revising our strategic plan. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that as we go through this semester as well.
Terrific, thank you. Dr. Larson.
Thank you. I think we're all aware that we're certainly focused on safety and security efforts here at the college, and I really want to acknowledge Karen Martley and her staff for all the work that went into the professional development days. Last week, we had a special focus track on safety and security issues. We held 9 ALICE trainings, 9 90-minute ALICE trainings, and more than 260 individuals attended those 9 sessions. We did have a few that were canceled due to weather, and we are taped one of the sessions, and we'll have that available. And we're also talking about how we can reschedule a face-to-face, but certainly want to thank everyone who participated in those. I'd also add that since we last met as a board, we've had some weather challenges, and I always want to acknowledge Rex and the grounds crew because they just do such an amazing job of keeping the campus clear and safe, and we've had no reported slips or trips or falls, given all the ice that we've had and experienced in several weeks. So we remain in very good shape.
Yes, I'd like to add, especially over the most recent ice storm that we all endured last weekend, the sidewalks were pristine. So Rex, you guys did a heck of a job on those. Thank you. Rex does a super job. They come through every time, so thank you very much. That was a joke. I can see the trustees were amused. Dr. McLeod, Mickey.
We've had a lot of interesting things going on, as was mentioned in the comments from the Faculty Senate. We've talked a lot about the reorganization, which actually has gone very well for the academic branch. Personally, for me, it's allowed me to learn a great deal about both our processes, but also about our curriculum and what we teach as we're trying to align things. And there have been many kind of happy coincidences to come out of this, like the way that we're moving Kansas Studies Institute kind of out of its really close alignment with history and into an alignment with all of our co-curriculars so that we can really spread that out and bring in some math, some science, so that we can use that Kansas Studies Institute more broadly. Also, this is one of my favorite times of year because this is when I get to engage the high school folks and meet with their students. On the 10th, we had the Healthcare Challenge where we had over 100 students out at OHEC working on skills labs and participating in some medal events for healthcare. And on the 20th of next month, we will actually be bringing in 200 juniors and seniors from around the area to look at the college, ask us questions, get some tours, talk about what we can offer them, and really start to kind of get them slowly indoctrinated into the idea that this is where they want to be.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. McLeod. I'd like to express my condolences for the defeat the Iowa State Cyclones endured against the mighty Jayhawks. Maybe next time.
Well, yeah, that happens a lot during the season, but in the tournament, we seem to always manage to do what needs to happen, so I'm okay with that.
That's terrific.
How's Notre Dame basketball?
Please, please. We don't need to go there, but thank you for. Karen, would you like to take the podium? Thank you.
I want to also say, too, thank you, Barbara, for those kind words, but it takes a village for us to do all that security programming, and her staff and Barbara as well were very instrumental in making that happen, so thank you, too, Barbara. I just want to give a little update on transportation. We have the driver's ed program and continuing ed, so we decided to do interim sections of the class in line with our strategic planning like credit did. So we opened one up and it filled, we opened a second one up and it filled, and a third one filled. So overall, we had 56 students, high school students, come up over the winter and break and complete driver's ed. And then in our follow-up, 12 of those students completed their 50 hours of driving. So when they returned to high school, they were ready to go in and take their they would have their official license at that point. And then we also just started offering, the Department of Education came to us through the state and wanted us to start training driver's education instructors. So that's just started to roll out as well. So that is a certification endorsement they have to have in order to do that training for all of the students that they work with. And then the last tie to driver's ed going on is we were asked by Blue Valley CAPS, who is our audience for driver's ed, those students, if they could do a marketing analysis on our marketing program that we do for our driver's ed. So they're looking at who we target, how we target the high school students, and for example, they talked to us about developing a car wrap to put around our driver's ed cars to help promote our program. So we can't wait to hear the ideas that the team at the high school comes back and shares with us. So, any questions?
It's terrific. Thank you, Karen. Dr. Weber.
I'm going to try to give a quick sneak peek at a next Learning Quality meeting I'll be given end-of-term census enrollment report. But I wanted to share just a couple numbers with a larger group today. For the first fall since 2012, we were actually up end of term 214 students, so up just over 1% in enrollment, and so we were pretty excited about that. A lot of efforts went into it. So I always like numbers, but I usually like a story that goes with the number. And so one of the decisions that we made as part of our last year's budget process was we made the decision to go ahead and reallocate from a fully part-time success advocate model to a blended full-time part-time. So we took a lot of our hours and shifted them, and we had 6 full-time success advocates, and their primary charge was to really help with the onboarding and acclimating process for our first-time full-time students. And one of our metrics we wanted to use to say how are they doing was we wanted to look at that fall to spring retention of that first-time full-time cohort. So that was a little over 1,500 students, and the exciting news is that we had an increase. So last year our fall to spring cohort came back, so we call it persisted, at 82.5%. This year it was 86.4%. So we had about a 4% increase in fall to spring persistence. And so that was their primary charge, the success advocates, to connect students with other supports on campus. But in all honesty, it was a college-wide effort to really focus on their success. And then the next step for that cohort is that our counseling department is really looking to overhaul their approach to student success and doing some strategic planning and modeling with students beyond that first, so beginning with that first semester, but beyond it. And so they'll be looking at some of our graduation and transfer rates too. So we're really getting to be very strategic and intentional about what we do with our first-time degree-seeking students.
Randy, that's super. One question with regards to student success and graduation. I keep hitting you all the time with this inquiry. What are our graduation numbers now, percentage?
So our first-time full-time cohort, it's a little less than we want to brag about, but you have to look at gains. 2 years ago, our average was 16% for the first-time full-time cohort. And that's within 150% of their program, so that would be within 3 years, that's 16%. Many graduate, but oftentimes they take longer, some of them transfer, so 16%. Last year, which would have been 15 would have been the fall 12 cohort, in 3 years graduated 18%. This year we had a graduation rate of 23%. So it's increased by over 40% in 2 years, and 23% really is pretty good given the community college climate. So our graduation plus transfer, and that becomes a new metric now that gets used in IPEDS, our graduation plus transfer is 45%, and that's one of those things that we're looking at trying to improve with those students as well. But It's demonstrating that we're doing more things right with those students. We're not where we want to be, but we're moving in the right direction, which is a good deal.
Making great progress. Everyone throughout the campus is part of that. So thanks a lot,
Absolutely.
Dr. Weber. That's terrific.
Question if I could. Do we have any indication how the metropolitan rate has impacted our enrollment?
The metropolitan rate impacted our enrollment pretty significantly. You know, we went at, and I don't have those numbers right in front of me, they're part of our strategic enrollment plan is to measure that, but I know we targeted for a 5% growth with our metro eligible students, and I think we hit 39% growth. So we had a lot more enrollment. I think in the fall we were up over about 200 students from the metro area. That I want to say it was like 770 to 970 or something like that head count. But
Is this our third semester since we put?
this is our second semester.
Second semester.
Yeah, we started in the fall.
Okay.
Trustee Lindstrom.
Have there been any pushback on that?
You know, we
Not from other institutions is what I'm assuming.
we get to have some conversations with partner institutions pretty frequently, and I really haven't heard anything. I think that doesn't mean that there aren't disappointments. One of the things that we did was we looked at our students who were involved in our affiliate programs, and some of them were coming here and trying to blend their educational experience, so maybe they were enrolled in a program that we have here that isn't offered in MCC, and rather than trying to get gen eds there, and then they have a morning class and a PM class here for culinary, now they can pick up a psychology and their history here that that wasn't discounted prior. And so some of it's those students who were interested in those programs, but we haven't had any outwardly pushback that I've heard.
Thank you. You may want to know that Wichita State University is now offering in-state tuition to Kansas City residents. You know, we do not offer in-state, but we do have a premium as far as our metro rate goes. So that's a great move, and thanks for moving that forward.
I do want to add something. I'm grateful that we're increasing those graduation rates, but one of my constant frustrations, and I always ring the same bell, is that not all of our students fail because they don't graduate. That's not always their end goal, and so I don't want the public to hear 16, 18, 23% graduation rates and see that as a failure, because it's a huge improvement, but also that's not all of our students' end goals. And we serve a very unique set of students from a broad range of intentions. And so we do a very good job at that. I just don't want the public to think that we're failing students, because we're not.
A number of our students come in as degree seekers and get swept up by industry prior to earning a credential from us. So,
That's terrific. We're going to close with a few comments about the President's report. I'd like to highlight, first of all, thanks to everyone who put so much effort into putting this report together. If you get a chance, please read it. Would like to recognize a few faculty members here who were distinguished in the report. First of all, Professor Danny Alexander was featured in an interview in the Kansas City Star about his recent book on Mary J. Blige. It's always good to see faculty publishing and then being recognized for that. Kathy Schrag, a faculty member in the speech department, presented a workshop at Black and Veatch titled An Introduction to Intercultural Communication. It's wonderful to see our faculty out in the community at large, especially giving lectures along those lines. Lastly, our own Dennis Arjo, Chair of Philosophy and Religion, has a recent book out there, Paradoxes of Liberalism and Parental Authority. So Dennis, you may get a few questions on that when you take the podium. That was released in December by Lexington Books. That's terrific. A comment about our role as a convener in the community. Johnson County Community College should be the convener in the community. And recently, a member, I believe, from city government in Shawnee said to me, gosh, I'm coming out here all the time now. And that's a good thing. And that's a real tribute to, especially to our staff, for making this happen. You may remember, and we've talked about this, on Election Day, November 8th, our police academy was used as a polling place. That was in response to a request by Ronnie Metzger, who was the county election commissioner, who called and needed help. He needed a place out here to where people could vote. And so I'm just going to read a few sentences from the note he sent us. You and your team were critical threads in that tapestry throughout the entire process, from initial planning to the courtesies that were extended to election workers and voters. The use of your facility provides us the opportunity to bring democracy to the residents of Johnson County at their neighborhood polling place. And that was terrific. I wish Chris Russell was here tonight to have heard that. And then recently, the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce conducted their legislative convener here. That was a first. Historically, it's always been another location. I have to say it was an honor for our college to host every legislator and public official in Johnson County onto our campus in the Rainier Center for this annual event, which we hope to be annually celebrated here. I got to recognize Jeff Hoyer, who has done such an incredible job, because these were almost like last-minute deals that came up, and he was able to find solutions to some of the challenges. Dick mentioned that we've been in Topeka. Yesterday, I attended a Council of Presidents meeting and later walked the halls of the State House with Dick. Dr. McLeod was up there yesterday at the KBR meetings. Sheila Maupin was covering the Technical Education Authority meetings, also up in Topeka. Of course, Dick was there. The KACCT Director Linda Funn, and also the KACCT lobbyist Ali Devine were all up there working on our behalf. So that's a lot of coverage for the community colleges and for our community college in Topeka. Today was up there with Kate Allen and Jean-Claude. Everybody was wanting to spend time with Jean-Claude and get a photo op. It was great to have him there. Probably one of the finest looking mascots of all the mascots. A heck of a lot better than, well, I won't go into specifics. But it's good being up in Topeka, especially for this session that's going to be so critical for all of us. Lastly, hats off to Karen Martley and her team for executing yet another great in-service week. You know, there's so many people who are part of that. I'd like to recognize Jay Glatz and his team for putting together wonderful breakfast and gatherings. I know that takes a lot of work. It's very well received. Our all-staff meeting was, I thought, one of the finer ones. And I'd like to recognize Dr. Korb, Judy's presentation on trying to make sense of all the campus initiatives and where they fit into the overall scheme of things was super effective and very well given. And so, and I was so grateful for that because I've yet to understand exactly what's going on. So thank you, Dr. Korb, for making that work because I think it's a big step in the right direction. We closed that meeting with a very heartfelt tribute to our faculty and staff and to the college in general by Dr. Scott Eveloff and his wife, Dr. Ruth Eisen. They both spoke very eloquently, blissfully, beautifully about what this college and our faculty and staff did for their son, Andrew, who passed on December 31st. Andrew was 24 years of age. He had a 3.3 GPA and had earned an Associates of Arts degree. You know, I read off the names of the 38 members of our faculty and staff that we were able to collect, the first being Holly Dressler in Access Services. And those 38 played a direct part in Andrew's success here at Johnson County Community College. But in reality, everyone here at our college, starting with you all, our trustees, were responsible for inspiring Andrew's learning, transforming him as an individual, and strengthening our community in the process. So thank you all very, very much. And that concludes the report.
Thank you, Dr. Sopcich. We move to old business. Under the heading of old business, I want to open up a discussion about the JCCC statements of principle with regard to our state and federal legislative priorities and policies. Does anyone have any comments or questions about the statements? We have had extensive conversations about these in previous meetings and throughout committee processes, so I don't want to, again, people to think that this is not being considered. But if there's no further conversation, I will move to new business. We have nothing under new business. So reports from board liaisons, Dr. Arjo. Hopefully some paternal wisdom.
Okay, I'm going to talk mainly about some matters that were referred to a little earlier, both by Lori Palladino and also by Mr. Carter regarding legislation relevant to the concealed carry policy. So as you probably know, we've been paying very close attention to what's been going on in Topeka regarding this legislation, and our FA's Vice President, Melanie Harvey, has been in contact with some legislatures, so we knew that there would be some legislation introduced that we would be very interested in. It came rather more quickly than we thought, so we were kind of scrambling today to come up with a response that we thought we'd have more time to develop. But at the FA meeting, we did have a motion to endorse a statement that was passed with a unanimous vote by members at the meeting. And then the Senate at their meeting later this afternoon endorsed pretty much the same statement. So I'm going to present that kind of a collective, here's what we think about these matters involving conceal and carry. Before I get to that, I want to kind of rehearse some of the reasons why we're doing this. They're in the statement, but I try to keep it succinct. We know going in that this is not a matter about which everybody is going to agree, including among faculty. There are some people who probably like the idea of concealed carry on campus, but we know from a survey we did last year that a pretty strong majority do not. So we are going to discharge our duties as an association to do what we think is right for the faculty and for the college and for our students in addressing most directly what happens in classrooms. Part of this, I think, reflects our confidence in the procedures and policies of this college and the COPS committee and our police force to do things that do keep the staff, the faculty, the students safe. We would like to just continue in those directions. I would also point out that our interests here align with often stated board preference for local control in these matters. So we think that those who are closest to this college, who know how it's run, who know the environment here, who know the climate here, should be the ones who are making decisions about how we keep people safe at this college. Lastly, I want to say just a little bit about educational values and how this whole debate reflects some considerations there. I'm actually pretty old-fashioned when it comes to thinking about education. I think fundamentally, regardless of what people come here for to study, that ultimately this is about a collective endeavor to pursue knowledge. And it is a collaborative endeavor. And for this to happen, there's got to be a fundamental level of trust. And I have concerns, I know I'm not alone in having concerns, that when we adopt a defensive posture vis-a-vis one another by coming to school armed, that's in very deep tension with that collaborative effort to pursue knowledge. So with that, I will read the statement that the two faculty bodies have endorsed this afternoon. So the Johnson County Community College Faculty Association and the Faculty Senate of Johnson County Community College hereby express support for legislation which will continue the exemptions to the state of Kansas conceal and carry law currently enjoyed by colleges and universities. While we recognize that opinions vary on the matter, a strong majority of our faculty oppose the presence of guns in JCCC classrooms and buildings. Furthermore, we have full confidence in JCCC's current policies and procedures and in the ability of the JCCC police force to secure the safety of students, staff, and faculty. We also believe decisions regarding the security of an academic community are best made by those most intimately familiar with the institution and its governance. It is the position of the JCCC faculty that the presence of guns in the classroom is fundamentally incompatible with the free and civil exchange of ideas and the open discussion of difficult and controversial topics that are the hallmark of higher education. So we present that, and that is our position, and we look forward to continuing to address these concerns, whatever may happen in Topeka, but also keeping an eye on the legislation. So now we'll take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Arjo, and thank you to the Faculty Senate and the association for working on that. I think it's important.
Okay.
Thanks. Johnson County Education and Research Triangle, Trustee Lindstrom.
Madam Chair, regarding the Johnson County Education Research Triangle, I'm going to give a little, just maybe a two-sentence history of how this began and where we are right now. Believe me, my report will be brief. The Johnson County Education Research Triangle was created in November of 08 when residents invested in the county's future by voting a 1/8 sales tax, 1/8 cent sales tax. Proceeds from this tax, first assessed in 2009, generate more than $15 million a year for higher education, degree offerings through unique partnerships between Johnson County Community College, through the University of Kansas and the Kansas State University. good news, I have good news and bad news as it relates to this, and the bad news is, I mean, we just have to deal with it. It's been 8 years now since the triangle has been in existence, and we have some term limits, and some of the people who are institutions in Johnson County are going off the board, and that's the bad news. The good news is receipts for 2016 were $17,207,215, which is $440,000 more than the previous year, 2015, or a 2.63% increase in sales tax in Johnson County. So that's very good news. As I mentioned, there is some membership transition because some of the members are termed off. There are 7 board members on JCERT. KU has an appointment. The Kansas Board of Regents has an appointment. Actually, KU has 2 because they have one for KU Edwards and then the research. And then K-State has an appointment. Johnson County Commission has an appointment. And the governor has an appointment. And we have an appointment here at the college, of which I serve in that capacity. We are losing off the board our institutional knowledge. Mayor Lenexa Mayor Mike Boehm is termed off. He's been on the board for 8 years now, and Johnson County Chairman Ed Eilert is going off as well. We are also losing two senators, state senators who no longer are serving in that capacity. Senator Kay Wolf and Senator Jeff Melcher are both going off, obviously, because they're not elected any longer. But the good news is that 3 of those 4 have been replaced. Lenexa Mayor Mike Boehm, the KU appointment, is being replaced by Leawood Mayor Peggy Dunn, which is terrific. Johnson County Chairman Ed Eilert, who is the Kansas Board of Regents appointment, is being replaced by Olathe Mayor Mike Copeland. And right now, Senator Wolf, who was another KU appointment, is being replaced by Representative Melissa Rooker. So that's the good news, and we meet quarterly, and our next meeting is this coming Monday, January 23rd, and it's at 7:30 a.m. at KU Edwards Center in the Best Building, which is about 125th and Quivira area. And anyone who wants more information about the Triangle can go on jocotriangle.com. Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Lindstrom. Anyone have questions? Okay. The Kansas Association of Community College Trustees, Dr. Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're referring to the Best Building, not necessarily the Best Building, but it was...
The best, B-E-S-T.
Yeah, thank you.
Business Education, Science, and Technology.
I was encouraged by your passionate report on the recertification and the importance of that spring meeting in 2018. In fact, I felt you were so passionate about that I'm suspecting that I'd like to know what your engagement in that meeting is going to be. Change your mind on anything. KACCT, Mr. Carter reported on the Education Day today that we participated. KACCT was a part of that. We have not met since December, but again, as Mr. Carter reported, our next meeting will be with the recognition of Phi Theta Kappa students on February 16th in Topeka. There's a luncheon held each year to recognize the Phi Theta Kappa students. And then the KACCT board meets in the afternoon of that meeting. There's also a presentation in that for a couple hours in the morning for KACCT members that are not attending their legislators on the Hill or at the State House. Then the National Legislative Summit is February 13th through the 16th. I'll be attending 11th through the 15th for the ACCT always has a board meeting during that time. And needless to say, there are a few changes in D.C. that will cause some additional excitement starting tomorrow, I guess. And but we're looking forward to that session with the National Legislative Summit. And that concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. Anyone have questions? Okay, moving to the foundation, Trustee Ingram.
Yes, the Foundation Executive Committee met Tuesday, January 10th in the Rainier Center and discussed the progress of commercializing the simulation glucose finger patent donated to the foundation. The college's legal team, the Small Business Development Center, and students are all involved in this project. The college's marketing students and Hippo, an outside marketing firm, selected the name Finger Shield for the device. Due to new competition in the marketplace, we are researching self-manufacturing versus licensing options. It was announced that Some Enchanted Evening Committee for 2017 will be chaired by Clint and Britton Robinson, and our friend John Stewart is going to serve as sponsorship chair. Nominations for the 2017 Johnson County End of the Year have been collected, and the selection committee meets soon. The Foundation Board Development Committee met on Wednesday, February the 11th, and is evaluating candidates for the 2017-2018 board slate. The recommendation for directors and members will be presented at the directors' meeting in April. And finally, Beyond Bounds, the biennial art auction gala benefiting the Nerman Museum of Contemporary Art, will be held Saturday, April 29th. This event will also celebrate the Nerman Museum's 10th anniversary, and we are honored to have Jerry and Margaret Nerman serve as honorary chairs. The foundation would like to invite the trustees and cabinet to our next foundation social event in the Nerman Museum on Thursday, February the 23rd at 5 p.m. to hear from Bruce Hartman, our museum executive director, about the event and the museum. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Ingram. Anyone have questions? Seeing none, we will move to the consent agenda, and these are typically non-controversial items, and they're listed all in your board packet. I do want to call out a couple of things, well, I should ask first if anyone has anything to pull off the consent agenda for separate consideration. Okay. I do want to make a note of the extensive list of retirements, people that are taking advantage of the fruits of the retirement incentive, and we're losing a lot of institutional history, but we wish all those folks well in their future endeavors and appreciate the gifts that they brought to the college while they were here. I also want to highlight the folks who received the Distinguished Service Awards this year and congratulate them and thank them for their years of service to the college. If there's no other comments,
I will move the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? A motion passes. I do not have anything for an executive session this evening, and 6:15. Meeting adjourned. I have to have a motion. Sorry, I need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. We're adjourned.